Okay, so I'm going to continue working on this president example and show you how to construct the frequency histogram now. So now that the frequency table is done, what we're going to do is open up some graph paper. So I'm going to create a graph here. I'm going to have to label this thing up. Actually, you know what? Let me make it a little bit darker than that. Doing this freehand, so it's not going to be perfect. Alright, so what we need to do is we need to put some labels on here. Now, if I go back to the frequency table, remember, we're going to use the class boundaries as the labels on the x-axis, and then the frequencies, those will be the labels for the y-axis. So what we do is the first boundary value, which we know in terms of a number, it's 42, but in terms of the boundary, it's 41.5. Now, to be honest, remember, the class width was 5, and once we have that thing, we're really not going to have to look back at this data when we label up this picture. The only thing we're going to need is these frequencies to look back at. But now that we know the first boundary we're starting at, and we know our class width, labeling this is going to be pretty easy. So we're going to start here at our first boundary value, which is 41.5. And, we need a distance across, and, you could do several things here. I mean, how many boxes do you want each bar to be? Just so it's easy to view, I'll do 3 boxes. So I'm going to put a tick mark every 3 boxes here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'll do one more, 6. Now, typically, you'd go back and you'd look and, you see 41.5, 46.5, 51.5, and, those would be the values, obviously, that would go down here. But like I said before, once you have this first boundary value of 41.5, you don't have to look back anymore because you know how far away the next boundary is. Now, I'm using 3 boxes to show this, but remember, it's really 5 away. So you add 5, and you get 46.5. Add 5. 51.5, and just keep adding 5. 56.5, 61.5, 66.5, and 71.5. Now remember, this is age, so I'll give it a label down here of age. Alright, so that's that. Now over here we have our frequency, so I'll label it F. And these are just going to go by ones. I mean, the highest we have to go up to is 14, so I'm hoping I got 14 boxes. It looks like I do. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Yep, we got plenty. All right, so the only thing left to do is to put in the bars. So if we look at the first bar, which is 42 to 46, or the boundary is 41.5 to 46.5, that goes up 4. So all we got to do is make this first bar go up 4. So this goes up 4. And then it's 11 and 14. Nine, 4, and then 3. Now, I'm writing the number of the frequency on the top of each bar. To be honest with you, that's not really necessary, being that, we're on a grid here. but it's kind of convenient when there's no grid snapped, and it's kind of tough to tell, exactly where those bars, the heights. Let's give this thing a title. So this is called a frequency histogram of present and age. All right, and to be honest with you, the only thing left to do is the general shape of this thing. And although it's not perfect, the shape, as you can see, generally is a bell. Some people would want to argue that it's a little bit skewed to the right, but notice the peak of this distribution happens in one of the two middle bars. Is it a perfect bell? Absolutely not. But I would say this is approximately a bell shape. All right, so that wraps up the scenario here. So also one other thing, I guess, if you're wondering, what's going on right here, why do we have this little space right here? Well, don't forget, this is the number 0 right here. And the first class, happens at 42, which has a boundary value of 41.5. So what that little wiggle does is it closes up the space that would happen between 0 and 42, which would be a very big space. You see, if we were to draw a histogram and have a big gap of space, before we started drawing, our bar graph, that would look ridiculous. So what this wiggle does is this wiggle collapses all this space and brings the bars closer to the axis to make it look a little nicer. And that's what we did here. All right, so that wraps it up. If you have any questions, shoot me an email. Thanks for watching.